La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Benvenuti to La Lanterna podcast. This is episode 63. Matt, how are you?
What a weird, can't believe it's 63. That's amazing. I'm doing well, Fabry. I'm excited for another match on the horizon. Serie A is back. Felt like it's been months since we played last.
I know. I have to ask for forgiveness. We have to ask for forgiveness to our listeners that our last episode came out a little late, even though we did record it soon after. I think it was a little bit of that post stress coming from the Torino match. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think any of us really wanted to talk about the Torino match that much. And to be fair, I think we had the opposite emotion after that match. Thank God the international break is here. Let's just get a reset really quick. And so I think that was naturally kind of what happened. There wasn't all that much more exciting things to talk about at the moment. But now we've got a lot of things to look forward to and a lot of things also to recap that happened while we were away. Probably most important, starting with the big celebration of Genoa's birthday, 130 years. Pretty incredible.
So the oldest club in Italy, 130 years. That's remarkable. That's incredible. That's something that obviously the big sisters, don't really care about. But I think from a national Italian perspective, I think that's super important. What do you think?
I mean, it's part of the heritage of the game. It's a really big thing. Obviously, I would say if any rival has something to pick about, it's because the founding members were English or whatever you might say. But who gives a shit? This is a club that's been around for a really, really long time. Mind you, we don't have the Phoenix Club variations of the same side that many of our rivals have had over the years. And when you consider just look at Genova and celebrating the birth. I feel like at one point they're going to ban Rosso blue shirts from the streets with all the parades we're throwing this year. But you see what's happening, what it means to the city. And that, I think, is what makes it so special.
For whomever didn't follow it or how much you care about it, essentially what happened was on the 7th of September, 1893, that's when the foundation of Genoa Cricket and Athletic Club, that's how it was called in the past. Then a few years later, also thanks to James Bensley, and we heard a lot more about that era with our friend Alex Pugno from our past, one of our past episodes. And essentially then it got changed the name from Genoa Athletic and Cricket Club to Football and Cricket, and hence the Cricket and Football Club CFC. The celebrations started on the Wednesday. It was when the fans went out in Via 20 Settembre, which is the main drag, the main street with all in the city center, essentially. It's a little bit up on the hills. You actually went there, so you remember it quite well. So the fans went all the way from the top to the bottom with flares, with a drone. It was really well organized by the fans, not by the club. So with the drone, you could see spelled out with these flares in red at night, of course, the Genoa all the way down, 1893. And then on a separate road called Via Roma, which is just a little bit to the north from there, from the Piazza dei Ferrari, which is then the center of the stage, the 130, so 130. Fans celebrated that way, lots of fireworks, and the images were just spectacular.
It was pretty incredible. It was amazing to see. Again, feels like every single time there's a big thing to celebrate, there's just such a movement within the city. And, for good reason. It's a really long history. It's a continuation of, pride and competition and representing the city of Genova. And I think the amazing thing is that you see all these years later how important the club still is to so many people.
That was exactly. Then the day after, which was on the 7th, my birthday too, by the way, we had celebrations organized by the club. This was in the Porto Antico. So again, you've been there as well, but it's like in the old bay where the old port used to be. Now it has been transformed after the 500th year of Columbus that coincided also the year after with the 100th anniversary for Genoa. It's like this little bay area that turned into like more of a touristic area, which is very nice. Lots of cafes, lots of restaurants, marina, and so on. So it's very, very, very pretty. And the club, so 777, organized this party per se around there with music, with entertainment, with guests, and so on. And on that, they had a stage and so on, of course. And on that stage, they presented the third jersey, the third kit, which was also the commemorative 130-year commemorative kit. The presentation was quite interesting, a little bit different. And also the third kit is a little bit different. I think there's a lot of controversy with respect to the fact of who likes it and who doesn't. I'm going to say it's an easy 50-50. You would see as many people that liked it and as many people that dislike it, rather than other kits like in the past and so on. You get a little bit, obviously, people, the Mogugno typical, where people complain, oh, I don't like it, but most at the end like it. This one here, I saw it a little bit difficult to find a majority.
Well, I think you're right. There definitely are fans that are supportive of the kit. I feel like the sense I got was more negative. I definitely was not impressed, to be completely honest. I think the kit, when you see it available, and if you're on the site and check it out, presentation maybe looks a little bit better. I still feel like I probably would still buy it. So I can't completely knock it that much. But I do think, for folks who maybe have not seen it, I'm sure everyone that's listening has seen the shirt already. A gold shirt with the Grifoni logo and the 130 years kind of written underneath it. So a slightly modified crest, but pretty much the same crest, just with that special 130 anniversary kind of mark on it. Gold kind of shirt. It's got actually one of the details that I don't think was as obvious in the announcement, which is kind of nice, is similar to the home kit. It has kind of that like cross niche stitching on the kind of sleeves,
like beehive type of thing. Or is that,
yeah, it gives it kind of like a I don't know exactly.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like it looks like reversed stitching.
Right. Yeah. So you see the stitching, and it kind of, you see some athletic shirts that look like that. And then I think also what was more apparent in later images of the shirt is that also that the Grifone with 130 is embossed within the shirt all over the print. So you kind of see this kind of subtle print that probably isn't that noticeable unless you're up really close. That really, really emphasizes that. So I mean, I think all in all, it's not a bad kit. From my reaction, I think for me, it kind of, this is probably a slap in the face to the designers, but it looks like a shirt that was put together quickly. And maybe it was. I mean, this Kappa deal came back really quickly after signing with Castor, and maybe they had this in the works. Maybe they didn't. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of elements. I think the bigger thing that I have a problem with, that I think most people have a problem with, is that it's not a historic shirt. We've had releases over the last 10 years. I think Lotto and maybe Araya had done one of them, where you have 120, you have 125, you have 130. And I think what we've grown accustomed to with those releases is pretty much we're going back to the past. We're designing a shirt that's retro. I think you might know this better than me, but many of the shirts that were released in previous iterations were not actually seemingly meant to be worn in matches because they were such a retro design. And I think we did wear one of them. I think the green Lotto one I'm thinking of, that might have been actually the keeper shirt.
The one that you're talking about was with the green Lotto. It was Lotto, you're right.
Yeah.
And it was green for the like a military green, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. But that was the goalie, and while the players, the regular players, had a blue with the little edges that were red and the collar that was red.
Yes, that's right.
But yes, you are right. I remember the 100th and the 110th, the 120th, all red and blue except this blue one that we mentioned. But they all kind of reprise the older style and whatnot of the past. And you're right; they most likely did not even ever use it, except maybe one or twice. Type of examples. However, even fans themselves, they were saying that you buy it, the old ones I'm talking about, and they were not even wearable, like they were not cool to wear. It was just cool to have. Right. While this one here, being a very clean, fledged, proper kit. It is wearable. It's away from the tradition. I do agree with you that it's very far away from the past, editions. However, at the same time, I heard a lot of praises from who was not Genoano.
That's my problem, though. I don't care about that. Like, I think it should be coming from Genoano. It should be, I don't want to be Venezia. I don't want people to look at our shirts and say, wow, what a stylish club, Genoa. Like, we should be representing our history. And I think that's where it falls down. I like the shirt, but also I can't wear it. I'm speaking among one of probably many other fans looking online right now. It's only in the skin fit design. You look online with all the sizes right now, it's at the 14th. There are only 7 sizes left for triple XL. I've been to Genova before. There aren't that many obese people in the city. There's a reason why the triple XL sells out, and that's because the Kappa shirts do not fit. And so this is like, again, it's just so fucking frustrating when we have these partnerships. Like, great for the technical sponsor, but I'm not gonna be able to wear the shirt. So I could have it to sit and hang it or something, but it's not that nice of a shirt to put in a display because it's more like an athletic, like sweatshirt, because that's how Kappa's designs are. So for me, the whole thing is kind of a failure. But
I agree. And let me add to that, just because we're in a complaint rant right now, but the e-commerce store is still selling only the kit 1, kit 2, like home and away, the 2 versions, the Pro and the Fan. So the more expensive, thin, the little bit wider, not wider, but not thin, of both. And that's it. They're not even selling pants. They're not selling anything else. And that's frustrating as well, if I may say, especially for us that cannot go to Genova. And I'm not only referring to us abroad, but also whomever is Genoano that is also around Italy, but not in Genova. So I don't know. I think they have to get their act together. Maybe it's the least of their worries right now. Thank God that I've ordered for my birthday. Well, my wife did, but the away kit, but that was from an eBay store, which was a legit store from God knows where, I guess Padova. I can't remember now where it was. It's still on its way here, but thank God they have that one. And I was actually, I managed also to customize it with a name and a number, which you cannot do right now, currently anyways.
These are all against this. I mean, obviously I don't need to repeat that, but it's just like, I mean, they may as well not even have a commerce site, by the way, because all of the shirts beyond the 130th anniversary shirt are sold out. And you can't even get like a sign me up for the next time this thing is available thing. So I don't even know what we're doing here. I just think it is what it is. It'll look nice on the pitch when the players wear it. It's not really truly history. We've seen similar shirts from Kappa, particularly for Venezia in the past, which is where some people are also picking on us for, I think rightly so. And that's where that's where I think it loses it a little bit. It's like, this should be special. It shouldn't look like something another team wears. But I'll end the rant there. I know some people do like it. I do think without context, it's a decent shirt. And I expect it to look pretty good when the players do wear it on the pitch, assuming we do. But I'm with you. I'd love to be able to support the club, at least in that way. We do have a new way of supporting the club that has just recently announced this. So maybe we should talk about that too. I will do a disservice in describing exactly what this is. So help me out here, because I was basically Google translating an email that I got earlier in the week. But Genoa announced earlier this year earlier this week that you can now invest in the club. So essentially fans can put dollars that are used for club purposes. There are a handful of specific things that are mentioned that is generally kind of meant to go towards team facilities and to help the club as they're trying to really build a positive place to grow and develop football talent. So I think more so there than anything else. The fans are actually being promised kind of an interesting return on this. It's an investment is the way that they're selling it. So you put money in, there's a 9% interest that you will receive annually for the time that you continue to leave those funds there. And I can't remember the specifics. I saw something with like 5,000 euro. I don't know if that's the limit or if that was an example or something.
So the minimum investment is 1,000 and increments of, yes. And their goal is to reach 5 million.
Got it. Okay. Well, I completely misread that, but that's that's up. I mean, I think it's a cool thing. I know this is somewhat unusual, and maybe it feels strange kind of having a return on something like this as a fan, because we don't really think it's part of like this weird modern football thing where we don't really think about our club as investments. And, unfortunately, actually, there were some recent comments. I think 7-7 were quoted about, football teams being investments and being part of like a really uber capitalistic approach to what's happening right now, which I know didn't really make anybody feel feel comfortable, including myself. But there is something kind of cool with this. I remember when I was several years ago, I think we maybe talked about this on the pod before, but there's a club called CS Lebowski. They're they're somewhere in Florence in non-league Italian football, lower than Serie C, I think maybe even lower than Serie D. I don't know exactly where they are. But one of their pitches was, we want to be a community club. And so you can be an owner, for a really, really nominal fee. Like for that thing is like €25. And then you have a say in the town halls, you're participating. Some people can get voted to have more specific management things. I learned pretty quickly that doing this in the US was kind of a fool's errand because I couldn't really participate in anything. But what I think the parallel, one of the cool things that's going on here, and I know many other clubs have done this too, is that you do feel like you're part of the growth of the club. You can contribute something towards the club's progress. So I don't know. I think it's a cool thing.
Oh, it's pretty cool, especially when you see the fact that most of the investment, as you mentioned before, is for the facilities for the youth sector. It's this abbey that is going to be transformed into like a dorm and, facilities around that. And they're going to start with one pitch and then, all the facilities, the gym underneath the pitch and all that is needed with the possibility of expansion with some land that is around there. But let's wait and see. It's open to also foreign, and I'm not trying to do advertising here, but it's open to foreign investment as well. And so for whomever is interested, obviously, just go and check. I don't remember the link. I'll post it, or maybe not. I don't know. Or actually, you know what? If anyone is interested, just send us a direct message and we'll definitely share that link with you. Before we go to the break, I wanted to also mention a couple of things. So there was an international break with the new coach. A lot of surprises have come from Immobile being captain. And I'm sorry, I have a really strong negative feeling or thought around that one. I don't know about you, Matt, but I did not like it. That was our first outing against North Macedonia. It was a horrible match. And obviously who had to score was also him as well. And then in the second match against Ukraine, basically in a team that did not even present themselves, like it was, you couldn't even touch and feel the presence of Ukraine there. Italy got to win, thankfully. And all this to say that Retegui was not even in the starting 11, did not even appear in the first match. And the second match just was called in the last 10 minutes. And from someone that was like the main striker under Mancini, I could say a gazillion negative comments also against that son of a mother. And now this poor guy feels like he has to, which is good that he has to sweat for a jersey, but at the same time, it's going backwards rather than forwards. Even though in the second match you saw a little bit of a different starting 11, but I have some reservations with respect to what Spalletti is doing right now.
I mean, the results don't really bear out what's happened so far. And of course, it's not even just we want our guy to be keeping the form or to get some playing time. Like I think a lot of people outside of Genoa believe that Retegui should be leading the line. And so for him to not even get time, I think is a head scratcher. And I don't know, hopefully it changes.
Last but not least, transfer market was over, but the Turkish market was open for a little bit longer. I can't remember up until what date, but finally, we have great news on the outbound. We have Biraski, which we rescinded an agreement on both sides, his contract. So he signed for one of the Istanbul teams. The same team has also signed on a loan the infamous or famous or not famous Yalcin. So he's finally off of our books, at least for this year. And sadly, his contract is till 2026. So that's still something very heavy on our books.
Yeah. I mean, I know many Genoano were wildly celebrating this one, and I don't blame them. I'm with you. I think everyone kind of felt like Biraski his time is kind of come and gone. I'm not sure if Yalcin's time ever really took off for the club. It's, I think we're better off, but it does make you feel a little bit like, man, we really fucked this one up with Yalcin. I mean, we just brought this guy in a year ago and we're already sending him back to Turkey to actually a lesser side than where he came from. So I obviously wish the players the best and everything else, but hopefully we don't have too many more like this where we have to cut our losses. I mean, did we sell him at a loss? Do you know? I can't recall what
it's on a straight loan.
Just a loan. Yeah.
Anyways, let's go to the break with our special guest coming right up. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, and I approve this message. Welcome back to La Lanterna podcast, and we have a special guest. Well, I did meet him quite a while ago. I'm going to say it was not last season, it was the season before. That was the bad season for us. At least we went down. So he called me soon after the season because what happened was we had lost our center back, which we all loved him, called Ostegard. And he called me saying, hey, do you want to come over to my pod? Because I want to talk and know a little bit more about Ostegard. I'm like, oh, hell yeah. And give him back to us. We want him. Anyways, let him introduce himself. And let me all just say, welcome to our pod, Joe.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm, a little bit bittersweet about Genoa's promotion, which is going to sound offensive at first, but let me explain and you guys will understand. I love your podcast. I don't miss an episode. And for me, it was a great way to get insight into Serie B because I don't watch a lot of Serie B. There's just a couple podcasts that I follow, whether it's you guys or Rigore because they cover Venezia a little bit, or like a football, they cover all over the place. So for me, it was a little bittersweet that Genoa was getting promoted because, great to have a historic club back in Serie A. Of course, it's where Genoa belongs. But selfishly, I guess I lost a bit of a source for Serie B coverage. But pleasure to be on. Can't wait to talk about, obviously, Napoli or Genoa Napoli on Saturday.
Of course. Well, actually, thank you for. We'll talk a little bit more about what you do and whatnot, but because I mentioned about your pod. But one thing, just to take advantage of the few words that you just used about Serie B, great match coming up this weekend. It's a Sampdoria Cittadella with our friend Jake from Città Calcio USA. Cittadella came to Genova back in the day when there was almost like a mutiny and won against Genoa. And I told him, you better do the same thing now against Sampdoria. Anyways.
Yeah, of course.
So let's talk about yourself. So what do you do? What talk a little bit about your pod.
Yeah, for sure. So I host the ForzaNapoli podcast. I've been doing that on season 5 now, which is mind-boggling to me. Never thought it would go this long. To be honest, I started it as just something to do during the COVID lockdown. And it just continued to grow. It got more and more popular and people started interacting with me more. Now I genuinely have an entirely additional set of friends, let's say, because it's not like I abandoned all my regular friends, but I know so many people that I interact with. And I've said this even on my show that, not that I travel much, but on the odd occasion that I do, there's always a Napoli fan out there that I can reach out to and say, hey, where's a great place to eat? Like I went to Nashville, for example, in the States, and sure enough, there's a Napoli fan there, and he told me where to get the best hot chicken, and we met up for that, or obviously barbecue in Nashville, and I never would have had that connection right without the show. And then also about a little bit over a year ago, I also started a website, ForzaNapoliPress.com. For people who want to get written content, which is also a way for me to cover the Primavera and the Femminile as well. It's a bit more difficult to cover it all on the podcast. So, to have some written content. And it's also an outlet for aspiring writers or people who want to just have somewhere to post their thoughts, but maybe don't want to write consistently. And, it's another source of English content for Napoli because, while the team is well run financially, let's say, the one area that could really use improvement is their sort of international marketing and how they reach out to the non-Italian fans. And I'm sure a lot of fans of other Serie A clubs can relate to that. So, for me, it's been a great way to interact with people. It's been a lot of fun.
I love that.
No, it's exactly what kind of for us, it's a little bit different, obviously, because we're not part of the larger teams, even though we're the oldest. We're obviously not the most well known, especially I would say nowadays. Maybe in the past we were 100 years ago or so on, we definitely would have been the thing to be feared of. but not right now. And I guess differently to you, well, you say, okay, I can find Napolitani anywhere. For us, it's a little bit more challenging. Like around Italy, around the world, you do find some odd Genoani, but from there also to find clubs and so on, that's a little bit more challenging. And that's more like we have our sister affiliated group or whatnot, which is called Genoani Si Resta. It's an Italian pod anyways, but they reach out to all Genovesi or Genoani that are around the world. So their audience obviously is Italian. For us being English speaking, pod, for us is not only to find if there are any Genoano that are mostly aiming for English speaking, but not only, of course, but also to recruit. So, and the fact that we managed or found some sympathizers and so brought them on board, or even we always love to reference our friend Eddie from Alabama, the fact that he for the longest wanted to find a team and so on, and he just married our cause and so on and became a full-fledged one of them. It's like amazing. So essentially that's what we're trying to do in our little thing, in our pastime. And actually you said 5 years, but Matt, so in theory it feels like 2 years, but so being the second year, but the truth to be told, we started 3 seasons ago.
3 seasons ago. I know.
It was at the tail end, right?
Yeah, like the last probably 10 games or so of our relegation campaign. I think we started recording around then, that did include the last match between Napoli and Genoa. But Joe, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, I think it's what makes it so much fun for us too. We obviously we're happy to be back in Serie A, but in the Serie B season, it was really exciting for us as well, because you just meet so many other fans of calcio. You get to know these clubs, you get to know a little bit more of what's happening, maybe not always in the spotlight, at least that we're used to paying attention to. So it's an amazing experience, and it's cool to interact with other fans out there that care so passionately about their club or about the same club.
Well, one thing I was going to ask you guys, because I was thinking about this, and I almost feel like, in a way, when you consider how Genoa seasons were going prior to relegation, you're kind of hovering around the relegation zone for a little bit there, right?
Right.
Do you feel that, like, obviously no fan wants their club to be relegated and to play in Serie B, even as competitive as Serie B is these days. But do you feel like that might have been a good thing, in a way that it was like taking a step back in order to take 2 steps forward?
I mean, I personally do. I mean, Fabry probably has a different perspective because he's seen this for a lot longer than I have. But I mean, I think one of the most important things for us was it gave us a chance to build on this kind of strangely positive end to that relegation campaign that we had, at least as like a fan base, where we were getting a bunch of shit from Sampdoria fans. We were going down, and there was a period of time. I mean, the team actually, even though our performances were pretty poor, there was definitely like a big unity when Blessing had come in. And so there was some stuff happening there. And we kind of seemingly built on that in a way that I don't remember seeing in the years that I've been following the club. And it also gave us a different, like you said, it's a totally different dynamic when you're going down to Serie B. And it's not to take anything away from Serie B, because we saw it as well. It's an incredibly difficult campaign. But when you have the chance also to have positive performances, to win, maybe to also achieve the goal, then it gives you something. I think if we were again in Serie A and then we're finishing in 17th or something, that negative kind of dire situation, that doesn't get kind of flushed out. So I think it was really big, especially for just like the mindset of the fan base. Now we maybe say something different if we end up in 17th by the end of this season or worse, but I personally agree with that. I think it was positive for the club. What do you think, Fabry?
Well, like you mentioned Fabry, just one point, because you mentioned the fans. I don't know, and Fabry, you can, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what the attendance numbers were like pre-relegation, but I know, listening to your pod, that season ticket sales are through the roof, like amongst the top clubs, which is unbelievable for, I mean, again, most historic club, but still technically newly promoted. And it just feels like there's been like a rejuvenation, amongst Genoani, right?
That's exactly where I was going to go with. Like, of course, the first part I'm going to say it feels in a way, quote unquote, that we're 1 year behind based on the fact of the relegation. So that means when you're building up towards whatever the new owners are trying to build, that means they're 1 year behind because obviously you have the Serie B in place. Mind you, from the outside point of view, to your point that you were saying, how about from the fan base, you were always like close to edging to the relegation. How does it feel going Serie B? I can see that because who is another fan, Milan, Inter, Juve, or Napoli, whomever, do they really care? It's a new owner. Yeah, maybe not too much. But for us, it's a huge difference. So the Genoa close to edging relegation is not the same Genoa today.
That's also true. Yeah.
Especially from a club perspective. So management, ownership, a whole bunch of things. So we're into this 777 Partners, which is a multi-property type of style, similar maybe to the Red Bull or the City. I don't know, a little bit different. All three of them are different among themselves anyways. But the fact of the Serie B, I would say, to your point as well, Joe, the fact of this rejuvenation, I'm not sure if it is a record breaking for Serie B itself. Probably not, but definitely the 22,000 for season tickets in last year in Serie B was huge, even for ratings and for followership, even from a Serie B perspective. And this year, where the record breaking for City, maybe it was not, maybe I'm mistaken with the 22, but the record breaking for Serie A anyways was held by Sampdoria after the year after they won the Scudetto. They're making fun of us, but even their Scudetto now is starting to be quite old, right? So we're talking about 1991. So in 1992, they were holding the record for the attendance, somewhere around the 22,000s as well. Anyways, and I'm just mistaking here with 20 versus 22. I can't remember. Maybe it was 20. Sorry, 20,000 with last year. Forgive me, for Genoa. The record was held by Sampdoria for, as I said, 30 years or whatnot, but with 21,490, whatever, right? And then we arrive with newly promoted and with this huge enthusiasm. Like, it was amazing. Even when Matt went to Genova last match day of relegation, so we were already in Serie B. Awful match. Who cared about whatever the result was? But Matt was telling me so many young people. So even back then, because of the new ownership, plus the Serie B, so everything kind of built up together. And we got this new record-breaking season tickets of 27,777. They stopped it on purpose there to do the 777, right? But it could have gone even easily at 28. And number 5 in all entire Italy, after big names, big numbers, big cities like Inter, Milan, Roma, and Lazio. So the two major big cities of Italy. I understand.
Don't forget, they also have, their stadiums are way bigger, so they can allocate more tickets for season ticket holders, right?
You're right, and at different prices too, right? So obviously, once the popular type of tickets, for us is like the Gradinata Nord would be way less than the Curva A or Curva B compared to in Napoli. I understand the situation in Napoli is a little bit different with the prices and so on. So most likely, also because I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, people are more likely to buy the tickets on the go rather than getting the season ticket, which is a little bit odd, but it's interesting too.
Yeah, well, one thing they do in Napoli too now that's almost become mandatory. You kind of find out on a match-by-match basis, but they introduced this mandatory fan card. So in order to buy tickets, you have to have a fan card. That in itself costs 20 euros, which, when you're adding it to the ticket price already, it starts to add up, especially for the casual fans. I think for the regular attendees, I mean, they know they're going to get their value buying the season tickets anyway. So the 20 euros is not going to make a big difference. But if you're an occasional fan, now you got to go through the hassle of figuring out, how do I get this fan card? On top of that, I got to pay the ticket price. So we've seen, like, there's been the season ticket sales were still pretty good, but lower than you would expect for the champions of Italy, especially after 30 years of not being champions. And they're not selling out. They're close. They're getting like 45,000 people at matches, but I think it's tied to that fan card, and ticket prices in general have steadily risen. I mean, the club is sort of walking the line a little bit in terms of ticket prices and fans. I mean, De Laurentiis is a character, as you know, and
oh yeah,
he even last season, like, a season where we were clearly clearly going to win the Scudetto. There was a point at which you knew could be very difficult to catch us, and then we had this really disappointing loss to Milan, and part of that was the fans protested during a season where you're going to win your first Scudetto in 31 years, 33 years, whatever, and you have fans protesting and not cheering because of ticket prices or whatever. And then he took this really awkward picture with the ultras, and so, I mean, the club's relationship with the fans in Napoli is not the greatest. You mentioned 777 Group a few times. I saw the video that they put out about this bond issuance, and I guess, more to that point of sort of restructuring the club and running it sustainably, I think, was the key message in that video, is how they want to run the club. And I almost feel like, even in that regard, getting relegated was a bit of an opportunity to kind of restructure, kind of clean house a little bit, and start building the club the way they wanted it to be run. And then the other reason I thought maybe going to Serie B was probably an advantage, and I'm sure you guys can talk a lot about this, is that to me, it was the perfect way to get Gilardino into the first team, right? Like, he, obviously, as you know, what was it, like 11 matches or something for the Primavera before he was promoted to the first team. And I wonder, like, would the club have taken that risk had Genoa been in Serie A? I mean, we look at, like, say, Pirlo at Juventus, obviously different situation, because Pirlo didn't even coach a single game for the I don't know if it was the Primavera or the next gen team, whichever one it was.
Right.
And Juve is a different monster altogether.
Right.
But to me, it almost felt like this was a great way to transition him into a Serie A manager, to give him a season in Serie B to kind of figure things out a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Sorry, Matt, but it's interesting that you're saying that. But I can give you examples like Palladino, right? So himself, even though he was in Serie A, he did prove himself to be well worthy. Now, is it better perhaps it's a totally different, as we call it in Italian, piazza. So that means sort of like a totally different environment compared to Monza. Monza's expectations are very different, even though we had the magical Silvio Berlusconi there, but the piazza, so the environment of Genova compared to Monza, the expectations and the pressures is a little bit quite hugely different. But Gilardino, I really think we even had some remarks or some commentary that came out from an interview with our old owner, Preziosi. And, he, even though similar to different owners that were like very few, actually, Cellino was one, and the other one, I can't remember, that were firing and hiring 3, 4, 5 different coaches per year. But you cannot deny that right now, if you look in Serie A, previous coaches that he fished out, talking first
absolutely.
Gilardino, then Juric, and then Thiago Motta, and so on.
Gasperini, no?
Gasperini, absolutely. He was almost probably the first one out of this list. But he was saying that Gilardino is someone to look after, meaning that he's going to be like a big one. So that's our hope. Now, from there has to be the adjustment.
There's the irony in that statement. We just talked about the massive hope of Genoa with Preziosi being gone, and here's the hope that he's bringing back to us with the Gilardino. Yeah, I always wonder how much really the club management knew what they had with Gilardino before that season. I kind of think it was a little bit of a happy accident, but it definitely, I'm with you 100%, Joe. I don't think this happens if we're in Serie A because we just fell on our face with Shevchenko. We can't put another, former Italian football star in charge and hope for the best. And it kind of, I think there was a natural fit there. Obviously, we were probably not prepared very well, especially at that point in the season, to make a pivot. We did want, and I think one of the more encouraging things about the club is this youth focus and trying to at least develop players at a younger level and move them on if we're not moving them on for our own good within the team. And so you've got a person who obviously players respect, who has a relationship at the youth level, who has done good things, at least in his minimal period in time there. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how much of it was a shot in the dark or this is really what it's going to be. But of course, we're all incredibly happy that it came about that way.
Well, let's not forget, he started as an interim coach, but then
at the beginning of the season, no? Like it was literally just the beginning of that season.
Well, it was,
or was it
back in December? So that's when he got him as he had 3 or 4 or 5 matches somewhere around there just to decide what to do. Yeah. And obviously his return was, except the one match against Parma. Looking at Parma right now, fantastic. Except that one match, which he scolded the guys like crazy, they followed him like
Ascoli match.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Ascoli was like 0-0, a little bit more tough, and that's fine. But then it was a win after win after win. And thanks to his mentality, his approach, his friendship, he creates this bond more than friendship with the players. If you look at the Girone di Ritorno, the second leg, basically Genoa killed it all. Because let's not forget, we were, I think it was 6th at the point when Gilardino came in. So, I mean, it's something it's something remarkable, definitely. He has to definitely be adjusted now to Serie A. Not that we did not have, I'm saying it wrongly. We had a very difficult calendar to start with Fiorentina at home, with the match at Roma. Mind you, we won, but that was good. And then the match against Torino, which I think Torino this year is one of the contenders, at least, if not for conference or Europa, one of the two.
Yeah, it's a good squad.
And Juric, we know him. That was another one, on the list as well, of coaches. But and now Napoli. So it's not easy. Then we're going to have a little bit of easier matches that gives you a breather, maybe perhaps, because all these even smaller teams that were doing decently lower level last year, this year they're surprising everyone. Like when you consider Lecce, when you consider Verona, when I don't know what's going to happen this year. Actually, it's more, it reminds us a little bit of Serie B last year. It seems, I'm going to say it very softly, finally an interesting Serie A rather than a boring. I don't.
No, I mean, absolutely. Like that's the part of we were looking and circling the calendar thinking maybe there's something that's going to happen there, but we've already seen a ton of unexpected results in these first 3 fixtures. Unfortunately, we don't have an easier one this next one, of course, against Napoli. But it should be exciting nonetheless, I think.
Yeah, well, another one was Frosinone beating Atalanta. And, for Napoli, like we started the season against Frosinone and we won, but it was kind of like, newly promoted club. Right. The last time they got promoted, they went straight back down. Probably can't read too much into that. Then they beat Atalanta and you think, okay, maybe that wasn't the terrible result. Unfortunately, then we lost to Lazio, who you guys beat. I mean, logic would say you guys beat Lazio, Lazio beat us. I mean, if we're jumping to predictions, I think following the logic, it means Genoa is going to beat Napoli. I'm sure we can talk about that. What about obviously a big factor with this match on Saturday is it's the first one after the international break. I know obviously Retegui was with the Italian national team. I want to say Dragusin was with, I've been watching all the Napoli players. I think he was playing for Romania against Kosovo because Amir Rahmani's there. how many Genoa players were off on duty? Because I can tell you Napoli had 15 players all over the place. So that could factor into this a little bit as well.
We definitely did not have the same amount of numbers that you guys had. So besides two big names that did not call up for two different reasons, first one is Goodmanson, that is right now suspended for allegedly sexual issues back at home. And the other one was Malinovsky, that was not called up by Ukraine. Otherwise, we had Dragusin that went out. We had Pushkas that went out, both with Romania. We had Retegui, of course, with Italia. And I think that was it. I don't know if you can think of anyone else there, Matt, but...
No, I was about to say, I feel like that's pretty much our...
Right now, anyways.
Right, but... our guys. Because, I mean, obviously we had a couple of guys in the under-21 groups, but I don't think anybody got called up there. Like Maturo, I don't think played for...
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what can make this match a little bit closer than, what might seem like a big sort of, big team versus or strong team versus a weaker team. And no offense to Genoa, but you've basically had your core group of players at home training for the last couple of weeks, whereas Napoli haven't. We've had our backups training. We also lost Politano, picked up a calf injury with the Italian team. I mean, we've got plenty of depth, so I don't think it'll be a huge issue. But I think that, and of course, playing in Genova, right? So I think those two combined can make this a closer match. And obviously the big thing for Napoli fans is, how do we respond after that? What was our worst half in a really long time, right? Against Lazio, that second half, it's really suddenly opened up a lot of questions about Garcia and his style. And
I was gonna ask you that, Joe. Compared to last year, and again, as you're using that excuse with us with respect to no offense to Napoli, but last year at a certain point it came boring from a Serie A, and I'm remembering the super boring Juventus 9 years in a row. Like, is to me that makes people go away following Serie A. I'm not saying it. Actually, it was exciting to see such a fresh and amazing, strong, super vibrant team that Spalletti had put together. Mind you, obviously, after when there were like 20 points, difference between first and second, so like, oh, fuck, who cares? Let's look at the other ones. No offense, of course, right? But you're starting to say, okay, that's already done, given. So let's
look for sure,
right? But this year, after this great season, a lot of critics are saying it's impossible that Napoli is going to do that again. And I'm assuming maybe that's the feeling among the Napolitani, but I want to hear it from you. Like, what's the expectation, not only with a new coach, but, for the season?
I would say
you kept a lot of good players too, right?
So, right, exactly. So, I mean, there's two ways you can look at that. I think the way most fans of other clubs are looking at it is that Napoli didn't do much on the Mercato. The coach changed, and we brought in a guy who really hasn't achieved a whole lot in his career, at least not since 2007 or something in the French league. And we lost the best defender in the league, and we replaced him with an unknown Brazilian guy who hasn't seen the pitch at all, right? So that's how a lot of fans outside the club are looking at it, and that's warranted. That's all warranted.
Mm-hmm.
And this match against Lazio really kind of confirmed some of the concerns that some people have. I think some people are still jumping to conclusions a little too quickly after one bad half. I'd still like to see more. The flip side of it is we still have the Serie A MVP. Granted, he hasn't scored in a while, but I mean, that doesn't mean he's playing poorly. It just means now he's getting double and triple teamed, and that's Kvaratskhelia. We still have the capocannoniere from last year, and that's Victor Osimhen. And as long as he stays healthy, either him or Lautaro Martinez are going to be the capocannoniere again. We still have all the key players in the midfield, Lobotka and Gisa Zielinski, who we thought was going to leave, and maybe Gabri Vega was going to come in. He ends up staying. That can be good or bad. I personally think it's a good thing. So all the components of the team are still there from last season for the most part, Kim aside. But the style under Garcia has been very, very different. I mean, it's certainly not Spalletti ball, and any Napoli fans are hoping to see Garcia play Spalletti ball. That's just not going to happen. It's not his way of playing. Garcia tends to be more direct, which is good for a guy like Osimhen, probably bad for a player like Lobotka, because Lobotka was so critical to Spalletti's system in that pivot. He was the quarterback, right? Everything went through him. You know, we were very compact, and we played, there were patterns of play and quick short passes, the triangles in the midfield. Whereas now we're seeing much more direct play, which means more long balls, probably less possession, because when you play the long ball, you're going to turn the ball over a bit more. And so it doesn't look like is as aesthetically pleasing as the football we saw last season. And that doesn't mean you can't win. There's different ways you can win.
Right.
But it has introduced some question marks. And then the other thing that a lot of Napoli fans were a little concerned about from that Lazio match was just how Garcia used his substitutions, because the players looked exhausted. You know, guys like Anguissa, for example.
Right.
And he still left them in there. And then we had alternatives. You know, in a era where you're allowed 5 substitutions, and when you have the depth that Napoli have, you expect to use all 5, and he didn't. But then you have a guy like, you know, Anguissa barely able to run anymore on the field, and a guy like Elmas who never stops running on the bench watching on. That led some of us to kind of start to get a little concerned. But for me, I think it's far too early still. I think, you know, it's also important to recognize that he's a new coach. Yeah, he may play the same system on paper, but it's a different style, as I said. So it's going to take some adapting for the players to kind of get used to his way of playing as well. The key thing, though, is we just need to hope that Milan and Inter, in particular, maybe Juve as well, because they don't play in Europe this year, don't get too far ahead, you know, before we kind of get into a rhythm. Fortunately, you know, we have the Derby della Madonnina this weekend, so hopefully they both draw points, or at least one of them will, right? And that's an opportunity for Napoli to get back closer to the top.
No, that's a good point. Definitely change of coach can be good or bad, depends. Like in this way, you didn't introduce a coach because you're doing bad during the year. That's what, at least we were used to. But you got a new coach because the other one said, okay, I just need a sabbatical. Then obviously that BS thing happened with Mancini. So obviously then, and then we saw ADL saying, no, I don't want to give it you Spalletti, you know, that whole bunch of history around that. It's like, don't even go there. Anyways, so no, for sure the difficulties I can see with the different styles of the 2 different coaches, with especially like an asset of a squad that was modeled most likely around Spalletti's formation rather than Garcia's. So Is it the whole team that has to now follow Garcia, or is it Garcia that has to follow Spalletti? And it seems more the first one. You know, it's not, I guess it's not easy.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, I think Napoli still have the players to play the style that Garcia wants, and we did make a couple late additions. I mean, Jesper Lindstrom was sort of the main one, and he really is. That is a Garcia type player, because what he likes tactically is for his wingers to drift towards the middle of the park. He likes to attack through the middle and have his fullbacks get forward, which is well suited to a player like Di Lorenzo. Obviously, you know, he likes to get up and down that right wing. But there's some tweaks need to be made, because, you know, we've seen Garcia has played Matthias Oliveira on the left side, a left back. And what you don't want to happen is both of your fullbacks get forward at the same time, because unless someone like Lobotka or Anguissa drops, you really expose yourself on the counterattack. You leave a lot of space in behind, and we saw that in that Lazio game, right? Like, we had more of the possession, we had more shot attempts and all these things, but it seemed like whenever Lazio got forward, it looked like they were going to score. And in fact, they did. Just a couple of the goals were disallowed for narrow offsides. So I think Garcia has a few tweaks to make there and getting the balance right between the attack and the defense. But I think the pieces are still there to have a successful squad, a strong squad. The other thing that's really a big question mark for Napoli fans is the center back situation.
Yeah.
And the next few rounds are going to be a big indicator of what's going on, because, you know, the big question mark in the summer, and we all knew it was going to happen, was Kim Min-jae's release clause was going to be exercised. He was going to go. Who are we going to replace him with? We were linked to pretty much any center back that might even be remotely available and their brothers and sisters and mothers. And then after all of these people that we were linked to, we end up signing a relatively unknown guy from Brazil. Mind you, I spoke to a Brazilian football expert, and he basically told me he's like a top 2 Brazilian center back. There's one guy that he said he prefers, which is Murillo, who is more expensive. The problem is, and these are what the reports are, and fans are starting to get a little bit frustrated, is that he didn't speak the language. I don't think he even spoke English, so that makes the transition more difficult, because how can you coach a guy that doesn't understand what you're saying, even if he has, Juan Jesus and Mario Rui that can translate in Portuguese. And then, of course, he's coming from Brazil. He's not coming from, Kim at least was playing in Europe. Even if it was Turkey, it was Europe, right? And, the pace of the game is different. So that takes some time getting accustomed to as well. People will say, yeah, well, Lindstrom, he wasn't coming from a big league, or he didn't need time. We played him 4 days after he joined Napoli, but he was playing in Germany. He played in the Europa League. He played in the Champions League. It's much easier for a player like that to transition to Serie A. So, I think that one of the biggest questions for Napoli fans is, could we see Nathan, who's the Brazilian center back we signed, in this match? We probably won't see him against Braga, and we're not going to start him, give him his first game in the Champions League. But then after that, we have Bologna, Udinese. So there's a couple of games. It'll be curious to see when he gets inserted into the squad, or of course, do we finally start using Ostergaard, who's been kind of waiting patiently for his opportunity?
I was going to open up also with that one. First, before I go to Ostergaard, I wanted to say, so you still believe that this saudade, which is this, we heard it back in the day, even before my time or our time, anyways, with the Brazilians coming into Italy with this melancholic type of, adaptation or adapting to the Serie A or Italy, different continent and so on. So it's called saudade. Do you still believe that is possible nowadays?
I mean, I might be trying to convince myself more than anything, to be honest. I mean, if he doesn't speak English, then I believe it, because right. Nowadays everyone seems to speak English, right? That's how Kim came in. He didn't speak Italian, but he was playing right away and continued to. But he spoke English enough, at least. So that being said, I mean, when Nathan gave his presentation conference, he was already speaking a little bit in Italian and doing fairly well. And then as the interview went on, he kind of started relying on the translator a bit more. And so that's been a focus. I mean, the reports were that the coaching staff were going to spend a lot of time with him during this international break. So we'll see. My opinion is that I don't think we're going to see him start the next couple matches. Maybe, the ideal situation is we have a game where we have a 2 or 3 goal lead, whether it's against Genoa or against Braga or against Bologna, who's not an easy team anyways. But hopefully you get one of those situations where you can at least bring him in off the bench and give him a bit of time just to get a feel for the game before you start starting him, right? And if you need to, with the schedule, we have Ostergaard. I mean, some people feel like, he's right-footed. He's really more of a backup to Rachmani. But I watch all the international games, and for Norway, he almost exclusively plays on the left side of the center back pair. So I know he can play there. I mean, the concern with Ostergaard is that he's a little bit prone to a costly error, and an error from a defender sometimes leads to a goal. It's different than an error from a striker who misses the target or whatever, like that happens. So that's really the big concern amongst Napoli fans for sure.
Well, before I turn it back to you, Joe, with respects to Leo Ostergaard, Matt, do you want to add something that you want to ask to Joe?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think this is a thought out loud. If Ostergaard does start, it'll be interesting. I'm sure it'll be a warm reception from the Marassi, but we've not had a ton of those moments. I mean, I guess most recently was Allegri a little bit, I think, got something, even though that was away from home, from the fans. And obviously there's a lot of history there with him in the club and his heroics last season for the good of the cause, as we can say. Against our rivals. But I guess I would say this match, I think, will be a really interesting tactical battle. And having some of the background on Now, Napoli have approached the last few matches, kind of makes it even more interesting too, because I think for us, we've seen Gilardino try to find his way a little bit within the Serie A season and how he wants to approach these matches. I think obviously match week 1 did not go as planned. Since then, we've pretty much trotted out a 4-3-2-1 with maybe some modular exceptions in the matches or some fluidity or something to that degree, which was kind of a departure. Last year, we saw pretty much always 5-3-2 type of a formation, or maybe if you want to call it 3-5-2, depending on how you look at those fullbacks. But I don't know. I mean, I'm really curious, Joe. I'm not at all worried about Napoli's ability to break down defense, but if Genoa come at this one in the same way we've approached the last 2 matches, which is really just kind of keep it tight and maybe try to nick something forward, do you think that plays to our advantage? Does that seem something that maybe Napoli can exploit? I think the biggest thing, if we go down early, it's going to be, I think we're going to try to chase for a point, and then it can get a little bit out of hand. But I wonder how you think Napoli might approach this one.
So I think Napoli is going to play their style of game. So it's going to be a high press and try to put pressure. If Genoa can get past that opening 15, 20 minutes, let's say, then I can see this match going a number of different ways, to be honest. Like I'm certainly not looking at this as, newly promoted club, guaranteed win. By no means. Not playing, away. And that formation, if Napoli struggle to break it down, like we have plenty of creativity, which helps.
Right.
But we've also been a little bit predictable. And so I think defending can work. Obviously, with Osimhen in the area, that's always a threat. If someone can, I'm expecting Mario Rui to finally start over Oliveira, which provides I think a more dangerous threat in terms of crossing the ball, because his cross is much better than Oliveira's. And definitely, an early goal would completely change the complexity of the match, because that forces Genoa now to, at some point, seek an equalizer, which opens up the park and therefore provides more space to pass through. But as I mentioned before, Napoli have looked very, very vulnerable on the break, right? So I can also see, Genoa holding it down, making it very difficult to break through. Napoli maybe starting to get a little bit frustrated. And as the match wears on, if it stays that way, getting more frustrated, maybe start to send guys forward a little bit more and take a little bit more risk. And that's where you expose yourself to that counterattack. I'm still expecting a positive result from Napoli. And again, I think where one of our biggest strengths is the depth of the squad. So we'll see. I mean, another big question mark is, will Raspadori start? Garcia likes him a lot. The problem is he just doesn't seem to have a position, right? Because, Osimhen is the number 9. We know, after the Italy match, Raspadori said that's his preferred position. Well, sorry, you're not going to play there with Osimhen in the squad. He can play on the left wing, but we have Kvara there. Right. So one of the options is, can he play on the right wing as the Politano replacement? It's probably his least preferred position. Like even at Sassuolo, he played on the left wing sometimes and as a false 9, but not so much on the right wing. Garcia's tested him out there. He's tested him out in the midfield. Another way you can incorporate him is you play him as a number 10 in a 4-2-3-1. There's been some rumors about that. My feeling is that it's going to be a typical 4-3-3 and you have Raspadori on the bench, but that's an option you can bring on if you're struggling to score, as is Giovanni Simeone, right? So, and that's another thing that we've seen from Garcia a few times now, where when we need to score, he's actually switched to a 4-4-2 and played Simeone and Osimhen as 2 big strikers in the area that we can play the cross into. It hasn't really worked, so I'll be curious to see if he continues to push that option. But obviously with the depth that we have, I think Napoli have the creativity to try to break it down. But yeah, as you can tell from a lot of what I've said so far, is I'm not as confident as maybe some Napoli fans are in terms of how this match is going to go.
Yeah, we are the ones that are supposed to be a little bit more cautious, not you.
Yeah, but it's also the Napolitano sort of superstition.
So the match is going to be on Saturday. And then, sorry, I'm just going to say this one thing, Matt. Sorry, I apologize. So, match is going to be on Saturday. As you mentioned, we have the first match of champions now that is going to be against Braga, which, in my opinion, is probably the weakest in the four teams. But it's 4 days right after. So, as you said, having the nationals coming back, didn't even train too much. They only have these few days right now. Then eyes in sight towards the first match, which is important to get those points as fast as possible in order to make sure that you're in the top two anyways, and not fall for the third, so being relegated down to Europa, or definitely not the fourth, like Juve has taught us. But it's 4 days after. So do you foresee that is going to be a little bit of a rotation based on the names that you also mentioned, or probably not, and this is more important compared to keeping one player versus another?
I think we might see 2 or 3 changes. I'm not expecting a ton of rotation because we have the options, right? So, you know, like Elmas starting over Zielinski, for example, against Braga is something I can say. I mean, Elmas is practically a first-team player. You're not going to lose a whole lot there. Yeah. I think a lot will depend on how the Genoa match goes as well, right? If it is a tight match and we're forced to leave our starters out there for longer than, what we might have if we had a big lead, then that influences the decisions for the Braga match as well, because the objective has to be to win both of these matches. So I think Garcia is going to have to try to find the right balance there, and there might be a little bit of risk taking as well, right? Like, let's say Napoli have a 1-goal lead against Genoa. He may still make a couple of changes with that Braga match in mind, which is risky, right? Because if you concede, then everyone's going to say, why did you change something that was working, and so on. So I'm not expecting a ton of rotation. If anything, I think we might see more rotation for that Bologna match after Braga, where, again, it's still an important match, still a difficult match. But at that point, if you've rolled with the same guys 2 matches in 4 days, after a number of them just played also a lot of minutes for their national teams and traveled and whatnot, now you're forced to rotate. So,
right.
What I'm expecting, it was something that's what Spalletti did when he was around, was that you make 2 to 3 changes for each of these matches, and that gives you enough freshness of legs in the squad without changing up the team so much that it affects the way they play.
Yeah, I don't think we have the benefit of looking forward towards a top tier European club in the midweek match or something. It's Braga, so it seems, and also the league, of course, is super important. I mean, I know we are with you in terms of the superstition element too, and I think one thing that's going to be really, really interesting this year, or in this match, and this is something I'm kind of keenly focused on, but I'm sure other Genoano are too. So we love Martinez, we love our keeper, but we have this way under Gila, which I think is kind of a split decision amongst Genoano, and where we play through the back. And we don't exactly have, these gilded-footed defenders and keepers back there. And watching that match against Torino, seeing their opening match against Fiorentina, watching how we played also in the Cup, almost losing that match to Modena, we are not exactly safe of errors in trying to play out of the back under pressure. And I'm really curious if we get pressure again from Garcia and from the Napoli team coming in the first few minutes of the match, if something happens, do you see all of a sudden this change of energy? I don't want to put too much of that out there in the world, because I don't want to see that happen, but I'm really, really interested, because I think one of the things we really kind of found the right balance with Lazio. I think against Torino, we saw a little bit of what we saw also against Fiorentina, where we just could not really find also a link between our midfield and our forwards. And so that combination of having a hard time kind of really dealing with pressure when it's really in our own half and in our final third especially, and then moving the ball forward in that same way. I know that's been Gilardino's focus, because I think he was completely outwitted in the first match. And honestly, I think he had a game plan for the last match that just didn't quite go to plan. So it's really an interesting thing to watch, to see if he's able to adapt to this, because I'm expecting that's going to be his style. We're going to want to still play from the back. We're going to want to still try to soak up some of that pressure. But those things don't exactly go hand in hand, you know? Sometimes you see those, like a classic EPL example of like huffing the ball forward and then reorganizing. We're not exactly doing that. So it'll be interesting to see if we abandon that. I don't think we will. And how that kind of affects at all how the players approach the match and what happens there.
I think it's a very risky approach. I mean,
yes.
Torino's a team, and Fiorentina as well, that defends very aggressively, right? And if you watch the first half of Napoli-Lazio, you'll see that even a team like Lazio, who have been playing under Sarri now, what is it, their third season under Sarri,
Yep.
Playing Sarri ball. He is one of these coaches that plays out of the back and quick passes. Lazio could barely hold on to the ball in that first half. Napoli were all over them with the press. But then the second half, once Napoli got a little bit tired and weren't able to press as aggressively, then the opposite happened. Because the problem, and I mentioned the compactness earlier, the problem with Garcia's Napoli so far, and again, we'll see if he tweaks this, but it feels like his team is not as compact. It's certainly not as compact as Spalletti's Napoli. Like, Spalletti was very clear. You should have no more than, say, 25, 30 yards between the last defender and the striker. And that makes it difficult to play through. And in fact, that's what Sarri did to Napoli. Mm-hmm. And it worked really well because I'm sure Sarri knows that Garcia likes to attack through the middle. So he made this kind of box in the middle of the field and crowded it, and that made it difficult for Napoli to attack through the middle. So when Napoli are stretched, when they're not as compact, if Genoa can play through that front line of press, which is very difficult, Osimhen on his own has sometimes created goals just by pressing because he's so fast and his strides are so big. Right. But if you can play through that and get the ball into the midfield, now you're going to find a lot of space. So that can kind of go both ways, but I still think it's going to be, for how aggressive Napoli's press is, you're playing with fire a little bit to try to play through that for sure.
I'm smiling because that's our weakest spot. Our weakest spot is, for sure, there's definitely this fact of the back. And you're right, Matt. Absolutely. This factor of it just needs to be a little bit faster, more tight or more, closed eyes type of approach. While our issue, and this is where all the media and comments and fans and critics and so on have been saying, the biggest issue, and you saw that in all three matches, including the Coppa Italia against Modena, is basically the balls coming from the midfield over to the attackers. So this year, we don't have the excuse of not having forwards because we do have them. The issue is the midfield bringing the balls over to the front. So if we are able to pass that, that's where we're going to stop anyways because we're not doing it. No,
I see what you. So then it looks really dire for us this weekend, huh? Yeah.
So, the rumors have it that Geladino has been working a lot on that. He's a great tactician. So I'm sure he's been screaming at the players. He's been not sleeping. He did say that he barely sleeps when he's preparing these big matches. So he's going to come with even less hair than what we saw him last time.
He's making up for it at the back, though.
Yeah, he is getting a little party back there. I kind of like it.
But no,
one thing that's interesting, though, I mean, you guys commented on how well, almost surprisingly, how well Gilardino's defense is, considering he was such a lethal striker. But to me, I think it makes perfect sense because as a striker, he knows how strikers think, and therefore he can plot on how to stop the way strikers think, right? So that'll be very interesting to see how he plans for Osimhen.
But you would also think, being a great striker as he was, he should teach to the midfield to say,
yes, how to get the ball to the striker.
Yeah. Exactly, I mean, it could play in any side of the pitch, but no, but that's true. Like, I don't know. It's going to be quite an interesting game, but let's don't talk about the predictions yet. We're going to get that in a moment. I wanted to talk quickly about the Gemellaggio. So I know we can't really speak for the fans. This is an ultra thing, has nothing to do with the players, has nothing to do with the team nor ownership or whatnot. But the Gemellaggio between Genoa and Napoli was probably the longest in history of Italian history. It started in 1982 and it ended a few years back, just not too long ago, anyways, like 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. And I remember the 2 seasons ago when we last when we were in Serie A, when we went to Napoli, some bad things have happened. Mind you that you guys are so huge that you have Curva A and Curva B, which are quite different between the two. I don't know, politics, not politics, group, not group, I don't know. And if I'm not mistaken, so don't quote me on this one, I think the issues were around with the Curva B. I don't know how much you're into all this or whatnot, but apparently some rumors, and I'm not saying this to point fingers or whatnot, but just to comment on this and see what your take is on that. A lot of fans from this Curva B, when Genoani went to Napoli, sure, the Gemellaggio had died there, but I know for a fact there's a huge, still great friendship among different fans. But they got cornered in Napoli saying, you ain't coming back here to Napoli. This is not a picnic. It's not camping ground. So get away, type of thing. But what do you think about all this, and what can happen? Not that we can predict any of this stuff, because as I said before, it's just fan stuff. It's nothing to do with fan like ultra, not even ultras or whatever you want to call it. But what do you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not as familiar with the history of the ultra groups, but I mean, just speaking generally, I mean, if you follow the Serie A sort of sports judge reports, pretty much every round that Napoli plays away from Napoli, the fans are singing about Vesuvius erupting, and then they get fined. The clubs get fined and all this stuff. So I wouldn't mind if that Gemellaggio returns, just because it would be nice to have a set of fans that we got along with, because it seems like everybody hates us sometimes. And although, I mean, there's, depending on who you ask, I mean, obviously I speak to a lot of Napolitani, both here and there, and it's a lot more offensive to them than it seems like the people who are singing these chants and fans of their clubs, even on this side of the ocean, feel like, look, it's just banter. No one actually wants the volcano to erupt and destroy the city, but the people there take it very, very seriously, and they are very, very offended by it. And obviously the league, you would think they agree if they're fining clubs for doing this every time. So I wouldn't mind if it would be nice to have a Gemellaggio again with especially with a historic club like that, and knowing that it went on for so long. I seem to recall that, I don't know if it had something to do with a fan being killed in a brawl or something, and that kind of ended it. And I don't know the exact reasons behind it, but yeah, it's especially for us, maybe a little bit different for you, Fabry, but certainly for Matt and I, it's almost something that's hard for us to understand, like the ultra culture, right? Because it's so different than even
Joe, don't I don't even understand it. But I think sometimes they're just pathetically ridiculous, all of them. But
yeah, it's a whole different podcast, probably.
Yeah,
we had our own with Fiorentina fans, a small contingent of them when they came into Genoa.
Yeah, that's another hatred there going on. But, I do understand it perhaps a little bit more with respect to that. I lived it, so I've seen it. Do I understand it? No, but I see it or know maybe some things more or why. But yeah, I do understand when you say that they get a lot more offended, because I get pissed when someone says there are 2 teams in Genoa. That's not true.
Yeah. Or the other worse version of that, which we won't even bring up on this podcast. Yeah.
But go on.
No, I mean, I'm curious, because like this, yeah, it's been 2 years. I know I live most of this stuff vicariously, honestly, through like members of the Genoa Club in New York who do know this more. And it's basically me like Google translating WhatsApp messages all the time. So I don't have any real understanding of this stuff, but I know there was surprise, I think, from that incident. There still were plenty. This was kind of like a big match for us, because if I'm not mistaken, it was like the second to last match and we were already down, or it may be confirmed we were going down when we lost. That's exactly what happened. And so there's that weird scene where all the players, which seemed like it happened every single match that year. after the game, they were kind of like, going over to the fans and kind of beside themselves, and you have to acknowledge the fans who are still going crazy and celebrating, but once again, you lost, and it's that kind of weird picture. But there were a decent number of traveling Genoa fans for that match, and so this has historically been one, obviously, where there's that brotherhood, and there's the Mia fraternity, like that whole thing has been there on both sides for many years. So I'm curious, with it going back to Genova, if it's going to be more of that, if you're going to see any messages even like that from the Gradinata Nord, or now the Gradinata Zena, the former Gradinata Sud, which will not be reclaimed. That's one thing I'm sort of curious about too. I'm not sure if we'll be able to pick up from the CB in the US. We have the Paramount Plus broadcast. I'm not sure. It's probably the same broadcast actually you guys are watching too. But yeah, I'm curious how that will actually play out, if at all, on the match day. I don't think it will. My hunch is that it won't be a big thing. But
yeah, and my understanding is it's still a cordial relationship. It's just no longer a Gemalaggio, right?
Right.
Well, a lot of people talked about the fact of generational change as well, so that can factor in some things. I was just reading a little bit now about it. I couldn't remember, as I mentioned before, but essentially very high level, because I think it's a little bit more complex than that. But the Genoani had, I'm just more or less reading off from Italian, but at a certain point, the Genoani had the demonstrated not friendship, but I'm trying to look at this word, thinking about this word in English, solidarietà. It's called like sympathy. With
solidarity is probably the literal.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. I didn't know if it was translated the same, but with Interisti fan, from something that happened about the death about this Daniele Bellardinelli. I think something about that happened against the Nizza fans or something like that. And because Napoli and Inter are definitely not friends, I think they took it too much to heart and they got pissed. Why? You're our friends, our Gemelaggio. And in my opinion, it was like a very silly reason to end the Gemelaggio, but they're ultras, and that's why we don't really understand them. No offense to them, of course, right?
Yeah, but exactly.
After this, so it's hopefully, let's see, as you said, there's still a lot of friendship. A lot of Napoletani that have moved to Genova, and so there has always been this friendship. As I said, the longest probably in the history of Serie A. But next match is coming up Saturday. We're recording today on Thursday, so most likely the pod will come out on Friday, the day before. But let's talk about predictions. So let's see. We talked already about a few things. We talked about the fact of nationals that have coming in from your side more than ours. We talked about also the midweek match that you guys have for Champions League. So we talked about a few weaknesses from both sides and whatnot. But I guess let's deep dive into what perhaps we're expecting, and I guess what the heart says, but also what the brain says. Let's start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, like as I alluded to throughout, I think it's going to be closer than what people might expect. I mean, I haven't checked the sports books, so I don't know what the bookmakers are predicting. For me, I mean, it's hard for me to not predict a Napoli win. I think Napoli are going to be motivated by the defeat to Lazio. They're going to be eager to get back on track. Again, knowing that the derby is this weekend, it's an opportunity to regain some ground. I mean, obviously, it's so early in the season that clubs are going to draw points. Again, hopefully not looking too far ahead to the Champions League, because that's an easy way to drop points in a match like this by not being focused, and that's on Garcia to keep the players focused, and again he's had the time to plan for this match and to make adjustments and review the footage from the Lazio match and see what worked and what didn't work, which should be easy because what worked was what we did in the first half and what didn't work was what we did in the second half. So for me, I think we still have the motivation, we still have the players playing in a difficult environment, but I'm going to go with a 2-0 Napoli win. I think we've scored, other than, I think we're averaging 2 goals a match. Genoa has been struggling to score. I mean, you guys have talked about the lack of service to Retegui, so I would say if Napoli can score more than one goal, then a victory should be pretty confident. I should be fairly confident in a victory there.
Yeah, I unfortunately, Joe, I have to agree with you on a lot of this. I feel a little differently to Fabry as to why we're not scoring. It's the same problem, but I kind of look at it differently. And that's also why I think this is really exciting for us, because as we've talked about on the pod, conceptually, we've had more time with our first team in this off week, trying to address some of the problems. We've had more of the squad there. From my perspective, we've not been able to advance the ball because we've not been able to properly address positioning in the press with this relatively new formation. Last season, we were really, really reliant on our fullbacks getting a lot of the ball in. We had these kind of ridiculously long crosses that were coming in, and reliant on players like Sabelli, who no one thought would be a key player, to really bring the ball in and have these wonderful crosses. Granted, not all of them really did that much, and you talk to some people and they say he's got a square foot or whatever the Italian phrase is that Fabry knows better than I do. But still, that was like a big part of how we played last season. If we can somehow figure out how to better position our midfield, I know Frendrup is more of a defensive midfielder, but we've seen decent passes from Strootman before. We know Badal is capable of like some crazy defensive unlocking passes, even if that's a throwback to another era of his kind of career, perhaps. But I'm curious if we can kind of find that balance. I'm not sure Napoli is exactly the opponent that will let us do that. So while I would expect some improvements maybe versus at least how we had previously set up in Fiorentina going back to the first match, I do think we'll still come up short here. I think probably, I do think it might be 2-0. I'll go ahead with more of like a silver lining vote and say it might finish 1-0. I think we are prone to giving up some decent chances. Maybe Martinez makes some good saves. I do think we'll look a little bit sharper in how we're kind of working here. I do also expect us to continue with, at least for now, the 4-3-2-1 formation that we've been putting out there. One player who's on my X Factor list, who Fabry and I talked about the last podcast, and I'm going to go the opposite way I did the same last podcast, is Malinovsky. And we were just chatting about this with our friend Eddie as well. So he's not been anywhere really in the first 3 games, and I think it maybe has to deal with his kind of skill set and how it fits within this group. I wouldn't be so surprised if we happen to get a little fortuitous free kick opportunity and he converts something there. So that could be one way if we are struggling to make that service, where we can maybe get a surprise result. But I think it will be tough. I'm most concerned about Napoli's pressing ability and our ability to break out of that in our own third, more than any other part of the pitch. But we'll see how it goes. Hopefully we have some good adjustments. And I think either way, both managers are going to have to react to each other during the match, which is always fun to watch.
For you, it's a 1-0 for Napoli?
Yeah.
I'm going to first give a little bit of spiel about it before I give you my answer to that. But let's say for the first time, Genoa has seen a coach where the people are with him. So the only coaches where the people, so the fans, the fan base was with the coach were Gasperini and Ballardini. So this is the first time that we're seeing a coach that the fan base is just like with him because of everything that he has done with Serie B. Having said that, so I'm just looking at it from a fan perspective. So you will always hear the Ferraris almost full sold out. I'm assuming and I'm hearing. So at least no less than 33,000 people. And that's including Napoletani, of course, right? But so you're going to hear a wall of people, the 12th man, whatever. Everybody knows that going at the Ferraris is difficult, especially when you have this type of numbers. Definitely, we do not want to see. Gilardino is the first one. You even said that, Matt, in the last pod, saying it's not that Gilardino is blind. He knows what the issues are. We know that we cannot base it all on defense. Right. We cannot continuously give ball possession to the opponents at home and away and then just hope for the typical, cross. And he will be working on these crosses because that's one of the things that has been missing. And that's why these balls are not getting all the way out to, whether it's coming from the back, whether it is Sabelli, whether it is from Bradel, we don't know. But that's definitely something that he's going to be working on. We know that the squad is not complete, and we know that Gilardino is trying to make his image on this squad. He changed it from the 3-5-2 of last year into a possible 4-3-2-1, 4-3-1-2, depending on. But to Matt's point as well, Malinovskyi still has to fit within this model, and he still needs a few matches. And definitely, it's not going to be the Napoli match that is going to make the difference, but definitely there has to be some changes with respect to the forward side compared to the last three matches. Because even the shots on goal just tells you enough of what the issue stands there. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I still think that even though the Torino match ended how it ended, it still showed, similar to what happened with Lazio, that if we want, and we are very tight together, it is not almost impossible, because Torino can only thank, you remember it, Matt, but I don't, the name of the forward that did the goal. If it wasn't for that guy that just came off the bench, it would have ended. It would have been a 0-0 all over. What I'm trying to say with this is, I do see that this match can lead towards a 0-0 based on the fact that if the players, Genoa players, are what they showed with Lazio and Torino, except for that one mistake that we have done, giving the opportunity for that wonder goal that the Torino striker did, even though we have totally a different team compared to Lazio's probably the closest. Mind you, they were like number 2 last year, right? Surprise maybe towards the end, but still. It still shows that I think at the back, we're solid if all the players are with their mindset and so on. Having said that, I think for the first time, I'm going to give you a result based on my heart and not my brain, and I think it's going to be a 0-0.
I like it.
And you know what? That's not that unrealistic of a prediction. I mean, if you look at the stats with Napoli this year, one of the biggest changes from last season is we consistently outperformed our XG. And we saw it. We were scoring wonder goals, Cavada from curling from outside the box, and Osimhen from tight angles, and all these crazy goals. And I do feel a little bit like we've regressed to the mean in that regard. And what you're seeing is Napoli attempting a lot of shots, but hitting the target very little. So probably most shot attempts in the league, a lot more from outside the area than we did under Spalletti, but struggling to hit the target. And then on the reverse side of it, we're conceding probably amongst the fewest shots in the league, but we seem to concede goals every time the ball hits the target. So the stats have flipped on us a little bit. I mean, and leave it to Napoli. We are the perfect club to wake up a player like Malinovskyi, who's going to fire a rocket from 25 yards out. I mean, he has an absolute cannon that's still there. And given the way this season has been going so far, obviously it's very early, but it wouldn't shock me in the least if this was the game that he woke up with one of those goals, and maybe anything between 0-0 and 2-1 or 1-2. I think is still realistic.
Agreed.
So it can technically be also a tripleta. Is that what you're trying to say? So it could be a go in anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Win,
I genuinely think it can, which is a concerning thought for Napoli fans, because we should be confident in a victory here. But maybe I'm still a little bit scarred from that Lazio match.
Well, definitely we're scarred from the Torino one, so we're both on the same place. So that's not good for us, because we didn't want a Napoli come all angry over to Genova. But I guess we are at a wrap. So before we go to the closing itself, tell us a little bit, how can fans or want to reach out to you and, for the pod and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. Forza Napoli Pod at most of your social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Same thing with all the streaming sites, Forza Napoli Podcast. And the website, again, is ForzaNapoliPress.com. You can find me personally at Joe_Fischietti5, mostly on Twitter is where you'll find me. Keep an eye on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, but mostly Twitter. I'm too old for all the, Fabry. We're our generation. We're too old to keep up with too much social media, but you can find me there.
Well, that's right. Even for us, you can find definitely us on the 3 social big ones anyway. So Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just have to do a search for La Lanterna podcast. That's the symbol of Genoa. And basically on all podcasts out there, you can still do the search as well. The only one that we were not able to fit in the entire name was on Twitter, because they're limited to a specific amount of characters. So the actual name of the profile, it's La Lanterna Pod. But other than that, if you just do a search, either if you do want to do it on social media, or even from the podcast perspective, if you do La Lanterna Podcast, it'll pop out and see both of our faces with the poster. But so reach out to us as well, send us messages. Anyone that is interested also to talk about Genoa in English, we also and have this beautiful chat. We call it We Are Genoa, with all English-speaking fans and so on. But I wanted to thank you personally very much, Joe, for coming and being our guest on our pod. And it was fantastic to see you again after last year that we talked about Ostigard. Still miss him. Remember that. We still miss him.
Good called hero.
But no, thank you again for coming. And never forget, always and forever, Forza Genoa. You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Si Resta. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.